Okay, let's talk about a study method that feels completely backward while you're doing it, but produces results that are, well, pretty much unbelievable. It's one of the most counterintuitive ideas in all of learning science, and it all starts with a simple question.
So picture this. You've got two groups of students. They're all prepping for the exact same exam. Group A, they're feeling great, super confident. Group B, on the other hand, is a bit shaky. They really struggle through their study session and they're not so sure they're ready. Now, who do you think aces the test?
Let's look a little closer. The confident group, they just reviewed their notes over and over, until everything looks super familiar. The uncertain group, though, they really had to wrestle with the material. Now, our gut tells us to bet on the confident group, right? I mean, it just makes sense. But the research shows the complete opposite. The group that felt uncertain, the one that struggled, they didn't just do a little better. They scored a staggering 200% higher. No, that's not a typo. This isn't a fluke, it's a predictable result. So what on earth is going on here?
Well, this wild phenomenon actually has a name: desirable difficulties. It's a framework from Dr. Koriat Bjork at UCLA, and it totally flips our script on what effective learning is supposed to feel like. The big idea is that struggle isn't a sign you're failing. It's actually a key ingredient for deep, long-lasting learning.
To really get why this works, we first have to talk about this little trick our brain plays on us. It's called the fluency illusion, and it's the main reason we keep choosing study methods that, honestly, just don't work in the long run.
To see through this illusion, you gotta understand how your memory works. Dr. Bjork says it's got two parts. First, there's retrieval strength. Think of this like the RAM on your computer. It's how easily you can pull something up right now. It's fast, but it's temporary. Then you have storage strength. This is your brain's hard drive. It's how deeply that information is locked in for the future.
And here's the absolute kicker. We assume that when something is easy to recall, it must be well learned. But it turns out the opposite is often true. The very things that make information easy to retrieve right now, like rereading your notes, often do almost nothing to build that deep, long-term storage strength.
This study just nails it. Researchers showed students a list of words. Some are in a huge, easy-to-read font, others were smaller. The students all predicted they'd remember the big font words way better. Why? Because it felt easier to process. But on the actual test, the font size had zero effect. Their feeling of confidence was a complete and total illusion.
So if our brains are tricking us into being lazy and ineffective, what's the fix? Well, this is where Dr. Bjork's work gets really practical. It's all about intentionally creating these so-called desirable difficulties. Now, that word desirable is key. We're not talking about making things impossible. We're talking about specific, manageable challenges that you add on purpose. Yeah, they'll slow you down in the moment. It'll feel harder. But that struggle is exactly what forces your brain to build stronger, deeper connections. And the data is just wild. Look at this math study. One group did blocked practice, solve 10 problems of one type, then 10 of another. The other group interleaved. They mixed all the problem types up. A week later, the blocked practice group bombed with the 25%. The interleaved group, they scored a 76%. That struggle of constantly switching gears paid off big time. And we see the exact same thing with vocabulary. One group just reread the words over and over. The other group kept testing themselves on the words. The results? The testing group retained over double the information, 80% versus just 36%. It proves it. Actively trying to remember something beats passively looking at it every single time. Okay, so we're on board. This stuff clearly works. The big question is, how do we actually do it? Well, there are 4 main ways you can start injecting this productive struggle into your own studying. These are the big 4, and each one is basically a weapon against that fluency illusion we talked about. You've got spacing out your study sessions, interleaving different topics, actively testing yourself, and generating answers from scratch. Let's break down how to actually build a study plan with these. All right, enough theory. Let's make this real. How do you take these 4 principles and build a study routine that actually cements information in your brain for the long haul? First up, spacing. The idea is simple. You have to fight that urge to cram. So instead of one marathon 5-hour session on Sunday night, break it up. Do 1 hour each day for 5 days. This forces your brain to work a little harder to recall the info each time, which makes the memory way stronger.
Next is interleaving. Now, this one feels really inefficient while you're doing it, but trust me, it's a powerhouse. Instead of studying all your math, then all your history, you mix them up. This forces your brain to constantly load and unload different mental models, and that builds incredible flexibility and a much deeper understanding.
The testing effect is all about making studying an active sport, not a passive one. So after you read a chapter, don't just reread the highlighted parts. Close the book. Force yourself to pull the main ideas out of your own head. Write a summary. Explain it out loud. Anything that makes you retrieve it.
And finally, we have the generation effect. This is all about producing information instead of just consuming it. Before a lecture starts, try to guess what questions will be answered. When you learn a new concept, don't just copy the example from the book, come up with your own. The act of creating builds these powerful hooks for your memory. Okay, now it is really, really important we get this next part right. More difficulty is not always better. There's a huge difference between a difficulty that is desirable and one that is just, well, impossible. This gives us some pretty clear rules of the road. These techniques are for long-term learning. So if your test is tomorrow, yeah, cramming is actually your best strategy for short-term recall. Same goes for a brand new topic. You need to build a basic foundation first before you start making things harder on yourself. And here's the best rule of thumb you can possibly follow. You want to be at the edge of your ability, not falling off a cliff. If you're getting things wrong more than half the time, the difficulty is too high. You're not learning. You're just getting frustrated. You got to dial it back until you're in that sweet spot of productive struggle.
So if you only take one thing away from this entire explainer, let it be this mindset shift. We have to completely reframe what effective studying feels like. If your study session feels smooth, easy, comfortable, you should actually be a little suspicious. That feeling of struggle, that mental friction, that is not a sign that you're failing. It's the sign that you're learning.
Let's end with a little challenge. Pick one thing you're trying to learn right now. Close your book, shut your laptop, and try to write down everything you can remember about it. That initial moment of panic, that mental grind you feel as you try to pull the information out of your brain, that isn't failure. That's desirable difficulty. That is the feeling of getting smart.